Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the VR Roundtable podcast and YouTube show. This is Steve, and this is going to be episode 49, and I am joined by Gary and Chris on this episode. Anthony is having a vacation or something. He's not going to be with us today. How are you gents doing?
I'm okay. Yep. It's all good over here. I've tried a few VR things this week, so I was a little bit busy the previous week, so I didn't get too much. I had to sort of fit it all in on one night, but this week I've managed to space things out a little bit more, so that's all good.
Yeah, it's good because there was a lot of little things to try this week, so I think that worked out nice. Chris, you're in a new setting. Where are you at?
I'm in Boothbay Harbor, Maine this week, which is it's on the coast, but yeah, it's a pretty small little town, and I'm surprised I have internet. I'm surprised I'm here, but as you can see by these ceilings, there's no way I could do VR this week. So, I mean, I just want to join you guys for the discussion and the news. So.
It looks pretty good there, actually. You look like you got a pretty decent internet connection.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, the graphics in actual reality are still the best. So enjoy the lake or wherever you're at. Okay, going with our normal format, we'll have some news and then some game discussion and then anywhere else it may take us kind of at a whim's notice. So the first news story that I have is the news that AltSpace is back. If you remembered a couple episodes ago, I don't remember which one exactly, but we talked that AltSpace was closing down due to a lack of funding. And honestly, I don't know if it actually ended up closed, but regardless, it's back. If they did close, it was very brief, and they secured some third-party funding. They haven't really said who. So it's really not much to say. It's a good thing. It's back. Gary, do you have any thoughts on this? Because I know you've actually spent time in AltSpace, whereas I personally have not.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it's great. Obviously, it's a good thing. And when I spent time in AltSpace, this was one of the first VR things I went into before I even received a HMD. So I love the experience in there. And I've got to say, you know, compared to some of the other social VR, the social chat VR experiences that I've tried, AltSpace is definitely one of the more polished ones. It feels like a complete experience. What they've got there isn't sort of mind-blowing or anything like that, but what they've got there works really well. And yeah, like I say, it's a polished experience. Not to discredit anything like VR chat or any of these others, but I've tried things like High Fidelity, which is one of the makers of Second Life. He's sort of created this app called High Fidelity, and I've been in there a few times, and it's great, but you know, it doesn't feel as polished as something like AltSpace. So the fact that they're continuing on with this is only good news.
So how for those like me who have never used AltSpace before, what do you actually do in there? Is it like so, you know, I've used Rec Room very early on, and there's actually games, and there's the, you know, you can socialize technically, but you're playing these little games and stuff. And then you have something like Big Screen where you can watch content, play flat games, do whatever. What do you actually spend your time doing in AltSpace?
Majority of the time, I mean, I guess you're just socializing, you're talking to other people, but they do have games and experiences in there. They also have, I think they probably did these kinds of things before Rec Room, actually, where they did sort of mini games that you can go into and do multiplayer games with people that you meet within the area. But a lot of it's all segregated into different rooms. So you, like a lot of these things, you just go into, choose a room you want to go in, meet some people. If you want to do a mini game together, then you can go ahead and do that. It's like I say, it's not going to blow your mind or anything like that, but I just feel like overall the experience is very polished in AltSpace, and I'm, like I say, glad they're continuing.
Okay. Yeah, they had like Dungeons and Dragons and all these little like card games and stuff, which I heard was fun. I never actually played it, but I think what's really cool about AltSpace is how they have this calendar of events. So like, you know, if there's something for everybody, like I know I like Rick and Morty, and Justin Roiland was in there once a few months ago. So there's cool stuff like that. And they get the presenters in like the mocap, or, you know, have Vive trackers on or something. So like they look better than everyone else. So it's kind of cool. But yeah,
that's the thing as well. See, to me, when I was looking at this from the outside before I realized they were in any kind of trouble, to me, it seemed like they were one of the most successful social VR experiences, because they continually tried to adapt and have these celebrities coming in and do shows, and they had live events all the time. So it was a little bit of a surprise to me when this news broke a few weeks ago.
Okay. Well, it's good that they're back, you know, in the end. So a few weeks ago, around the same time they announced that they were closing, Palmer Luckey had tweeted something to the effect of, should I save AltSpace? Then he said, caveat, I might not be able to, or something like that. So we don't know, but I always wonder if he's one of these third-party investors that gave them the influx of cash that they needed to remain open. But moving on, our next news story is there was a job posting. This story comes via Upload VR, but there was a job posting in Europe from PlayStation where they're looking for an R&D engineer. And in the job description, amongst several things, it mentioned that this person would be responsible for some development of multi-sensor VR technology, and I'm paraphrasing it here, but multi-sensor VR technology, as well as multiple image processing, which suggests the idea that perhaps Sony is looking at a multiple sensor technology, and which really is to be expected. You know, they have to continue, but it opens a sort of a can of worms, and wondering if this is something that will apply to the current PlayStation VR iteration connecting to the PlayStation 4, or is this merely development work for whatever the PlayStation VR successor is, and on the what's presumably would be named the PlayStation 5. Chris, did you see the story?
Yeah, I've seen it. You know, I played PlayStation VR once, kind of at like a Best Buy when it was first kind of like allowed for the public to try. But other than that, I haven't done it. But I mean, yeah, it would really benefit from having a third or a second camera, so you can do 360 for sure. The posting said something to the effect of like a future VR project, or it was kind of vague, I guess. I don't know. For a VR related project. So I'm assuming, I don't know. I'm assuming, are there enough USB ports on the PlayStation 4?
No, the PlayStation 4, it's not even USB. It's a proprietary port that the camera connects through, which is part of the problem. It's believed that either it was proprietary so that Sony could control the hardware and stop people from using the cameras for other purposes, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. The other thought is that from a hardware perspective, that port has a higher bandwidth or something to that effect. I personally don't know. Gary, what are your thoughts on this? I'm sure we all want to see a multi-sensor solution, but do you think this is referring to something coming to the existing hardware?
It's difficult to say. I'm not too sure, but I hope they could do something to adapt it, because it's one of the main complaints, isn't it? You know, with PSVR, you need slightly better tracking on some of these things. So if they can do that, that would be fantastic. But the way this looks from the story, you know, if they're just posting this advert for a job, it's still a way away if they're not even close to doing this. So that would probably speak to the fact that they're maybe thinking of something ahead to the next generation of VR for PlayStation, presumably on the next console. But yeah, it's a shame, because if they could do something where they could easily adapt, and I think we mentioned this a few weeks ago, where if they could just bring out some kind of software update where they could bring out an extra camera, you can just attach an extra camera, that would be great. But like you say, there's problems around that solution with this proprietary connection. So yeah, I'm not too sure. I hope they can do something to improve the tracking on this generation, but if not, then it'd be interesting to get something on the next console.
Yeah, I've done some work with the PlayStation Move service, which was kind of like before the Rift had touch controllers. You could use PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 cameras to kind of make the Move controllers work. And I know that literally the proprietary port is just USB 3.0, but like wired differently. So there's people who mod the connector to wire it to be 3.0. So are there like 3.0 ports? Because if there were, they could theoretically make a camera that has that port for like a second camera. I don't know. Just a thought.
There are spare ports. If they did release an additional camera model, they could connect it to the PlayStation, especially on the PlayStation 4 Pro, where it has an extra port in the back, so you wouldn't have to connect it into the front. But at that point, it's kind of like, that's adding a lot of confusion on the market. So you got PlayStation camera with their proprietary connector. You have PlayStation camera with this other connector, unless they included some sort of dongle in all packaging moving forward. I don't know how that would work without causing all sorts of confusion. So I have to assume that what this job posting is referring to is a future hardware revision, presumably PlayStation VR 2 and PlayStation 5. Moving on, our next story is, so there was a few days ago, 3 or 4 days, there was a post on the Oculus subreddit from a person who claims to have been involved in doing some market research and some voice work, basically for what they alluded to being an Oculus sort of Siri or Cortana product. Now, those of you with a Rift will know that included there is a voice assistant already, but this seemed to be more wide-reaching. Some of the recorded command prompts was, "Hey Oculus, turn down the thermostat," which seems kind of bizarre, almost like they're reaching into a sort of a Google type space with Alexa. Couldn't think of the name for a moment. So Gary, did you see the thread? Now before you comment, sorry, I will say that this user and all comments have since been deleted, so we can't go back and refer to it. So apparently maybe this person got in trouble, because obviously leaking this sort of data was probably bad for his employer, who I'm assuming was under some sort of NDA with Oculus.
Yeah, I did see this post before it sort of got deleted. The post, like you say, it wasn't deleted, but it was the comments were deleted, and everything that the link and everything that the guy put on there was no longer available at a later date. But I went on originally and saw this, but like a lot of these, I'll go on and look at these posts now. I think I'll check on that later and sort of read it in a little bit more detail. And of course, when I went back, it had gone, so I couldn't do that. But from what I read briefly, it looked very interesting. But I think some people were commenting that this might be more of a like an all-round Facebook kind of assistant rather than just aimed purely at Oculus. I know that they had some voice commands in there that were specifically associated for Oculus as well, but there was some speculation that it might be some kind of Facebook move into personal assistants as well. But the other thing is, with these assistants like Siri and Alexa, I haven't actually tried the Amazon Echo or anything like that, but just my experience of using Siri on my phone, I wonder, these are all interesting ideas, but how well do they work in practice? In my experience, they don't work too well, and I'm not too sure how well it would work in VR if you're constantly getting frustrated by having to repeat things again and again. And I think it's a good idea. I just don't know if we're ready for this kind of stuff yet.
Yeah, I've commented, I know in the past when we talked about voice commands for something, not this specifically, but I personally, I don't use voice commands very much because it's as much as they've improved with the contextual awareness, it's still sort of a pain in the butt, and you still try to can't freely speak. So I personally haven't even tried using the voice assistant button that's in Oculus Home. Chris, what say you? Have you tried this voice assistant in Oculus Home, and do you see any value in this sort of product if it's true?
Yeah, I mean, I'm unlike you guys. I have a Google Home at my apartment that I use pretty much all the time to ask questions to and stuff, set timers. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like they're really trying to kind of maybe merge Facebook into the Oculus experience a little bit. There's one that says, "I need you to send invite to Parker Griffin to join in on this video call." So like they're trying to maybe add, I don't know. But I do use the Oculus voice assistant because it's really easy to launch apps from it. You're just like, "Hey, Oculus, launch whatever." And I think it's really useful that the microphone's in the headset because it gets perfect recognition, whereas like Amazon Alexa or any of these other ones, the microphone might be far away, so it's harder to pick up the voice. So I mean, I think this is maybe the best use case for a voice assistant. If there's like a perfect use case, having the microphone right next to your mouth is probably the best. So I don't know, it's exciting.
Point. Yeah, it's a good point. It'd be very consistent. One of the other prompts that I thought was interesting was, "Hey Hey Oculus, start alien isolation." Sorry, I was skipping ahead to the word isolation in my head. And Now we know that we have the VR mod released by Nibre, the Mother VR mod, but why would Oculus themselves have this in their list of prompts? And it's again, assuming any of this is true, and I just speculate and wonder if that meant that maybe there was some official support in the works. Did you guys notice that one?
I didn't notice that one, but I think Sega have mentioned before, and they've sort of alluded very vaguely about the fact that they might be working on something to do with alien isolation in VR. This was going back a few months now, so I don't know if that's anything to speak to. But the other thing with this, you know, at the moment we've got a lot of there's a lot of interest in VR. VR is one of the hot new technologies at the moment, but the other side of it is AI, and this is sort of merging the AI personal assistant that you would have and VR into one. And these are two things that I constantly see. I'm not really following a lot of people that are specifically to do with anything AI on Twitter, and yet even people that are interested in virtual reality and technology in general, they're constantly tweeting about things to do with AI, artificial intelligence. And so I think that these technologies are definitely destined to come together at some point, and it's interesting that Oculus might possibly be going this route.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next story. And our next one, we started the show with something positive. Our next one is a bit negative, and it does deal with HTC, and that is that they posted their 9th straight quarter of losses. And I don't remember the currency, but it was roughly equivalent to about 65 million US, which is for a company that size isn't a massive loss, but I think the more telling story is that it is the 9th straight quarter of losses. And I know the bulk of that probably has nothing to do with the HTC Vive. The Vive itself may be profitable, but we are in the midst of an extended Oculus Rift sale where they've really hammered the price down. The PlayStation VR is not officially any lower, but you can regularly get one in a bundle now that is in the mid to low 300s. It's not too hard to pick up a PlayStation VR for less. Meanwhile, the HTC Vive still sits out there at retail at $799 plus all the optional accessories if you want to go that road. So Gary, what do you think of this? Does it spell? Is there any writing on the wall relative to HTC as a company, but more so relative to VR and what it may mean with the impending LG unit and the possibility of maybe even other Steam VR units in development that we know nothing of?
Well, I don't think it's really anything to do with VR, this profit and loss, and that the reporting on this. To me, it feels more like this is just a company that's been on a downward slope for quite a while now, and the addition of VR to that company was sort of a small part of it in some ways. So I don't think VR alone could turn it around, even if they were profitable on the Vive, which I hope they were, and I'm pretty sure they were profitable on that particular unit. But the problem I see with this is that there could be like a lack of confidence in the company, and because they have moved into VR, it could point others, without looking into it too directly, that it could point them into thinking that maybe VR is a problem industry, even though this might not have anything to do with VR at all. I think it could just dispel some kind of confidence in HTC and VR in general. And the problem I see is third parties that want to produce VR content for the Vive might be potentially turned away by something like this. I don't think they will be, because obviously they're looking into it more, but just to a casual observer looking at this, they could think that this is a negative thing for VR.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my feelings back. I'm very cautious with regards to HTC, and like you, I'm pretty sure that the Vive is not responsible in any way for the profit or for the losses the company has. I would have to think that unit, that cost center, whatever they would call it, itself is profitable. But at some point, it does have to affect the Vive business. If you look at Oculus, Oculus itself may be losing money within the Oculus, but they're backed by such a lush bank account with Facebook, and they can afford to be more risky, and they can afford to go out on a limb, whereas HTC has to be conservative. And I almost wonder if this is the reason why we have not seen a price drop on the Vive. Chris, did you see this story? And what are your thoughts if you did?
Yeah, I mean, even when I was considering getting a Vive, and when I did get one, I was kind of nervous about HTC's financial standing. Like, I was like, are they just gonna disappear 1 month or something? Because even back then they had a bunch of losses. So yeah, I mean, it's just more points to the fact that HTC really needs to get their stuff together, and it kind of seems like they're focusing more on the trying to sell VR rather than the smartphone market nowadays. But I mean, they have to, I don't know, all their smartphones lately haven't been very good, so they need to kind of work on that, I guess. They're profitable. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think they've done a good job with the Vive branding. So they've almost tried to like take it to a side place and try to build the Vive branding up on its own. So in a theoretical world, if HTC did file for bankruptcy, let's say a year from now or something, they could spin off the Vive, either sell it or take it down a separate path. And if they do, maybe it would continue in that way. But unfortunate news regardless, and hopefully we can see where that ends up. It can settle itself relatively soon. The next news story, so there was a PlayStation 4 firmware update in beta, version 5.0, and in general for the PlayStation 4, it's kind of an underwhelming update. A lot of people aren't happy with it, but it being a beta, sometimes there's unannounced features that'll work its way into the official 5.0 release. But in relative to VR, what this beta brings is you get notifications. Let's say you're streaming a game. You'll get, when people are watching you live and they leave comments, you'll get those comments right in your display. I personally haven't checked it out because I don't really stream online, and if I did, I don't think anybody would watch me live, so it makes it kind of hard to test those features out. But also I've heard, and it wasn't listed in any formal capacity, but I've not seen a video confirming it, but I have read that it includes trophy notifications. It doesn't spell out what the trophy was in terms of the trophy title, but you'll see the trophy icon and you'll know whether it was a bronze, silver, or gold trophy. So I think getting notifications in VR, and the real reason why this is on the list is because we have similar issues on the Oculus Rift and on the HTC Vive, where how does one a developer or the SDK themselves, how do they broach the subject of notifications? Because a notification that just pops up in your field of view can be immersive breaking for a lot of people. So Gary, did you see this? What is your overall take on notifications in a world, especially if you are playing maybe a medieval game and then you have this high-tech notification pop up?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I don't think it'd make too much of a difference to me as long as they're not constantly popping. You know, you got these notifications constantly popping in your field of view, then I guess then it could be a problem. But I don't think it'd be a big problem. And this is something that people who have owned PSVR have asked for a long time. You know, they wanted this this notification for trophies in particular, actually. But also the thing with this, streamers, if it can make it easier for people to stream PlayStation VR, then that can again only be a good thing, because the more streamers that are out there and the more people that can do it effectively and portray the VR experience effectively, then the better it will be for people jumping on board and purchasing PlayStation VR. But yeah, I think before what was happening is the streamers before this update, and again, like you say, it's only a beta at the moment. The full version will be released in the next few weeks. But before this update, they were limited in terms of resolution, more strictly limited, I should say, in terms of resolution and frame rate that they could do. And while I think all these things will help, the other thing on this update that I noticed is this cinematic mode, where whenever you're watching a movie in VR, it will give you virtual surround sound, 5.1 and 7.1 virtual surround sound, which is good. You know, I don't know, Steve, you own a PlayStation VR. Have you ever watched a movie in there?
No. And I
No.
probably won't be. I've been meaning to check out a 3D Blu-ray because the PlayStation VR is the only unit out there now where you can actually watch a 3D Blu-ray. All of the other, if you want to watch 3D content in, let's say, big screen on the Vive or on the Rift, you have to do it with a side-by-side or an over-under video. Whereas a 3D Blu-ray is a different format. The actual left and right eye is encoded as separate streams. To an extent, it's basically, it doesn't have the resolution like a lot of the other formats will, and so it probably has the most potential. And I've been meaning to check it out, and I just never do. And if I do, it's only to check it out to see how good the 3D is. I'm never gonna really actually watch a movie that way.
No. You've got to try that, because I'd be interested to see how that would vary compared to watching it on a TV or something like that, because you have got it's focused on each eye. You've not got this, I mean, even how imperceptible it is, you've got this very, very slight flickering with 3D TV, whereas as it switches between the two eyes, and you know, nobody will really notice that. But I'm interested to see if the experience is different in virtual reality.
Well, you can also, they can, within a VR headset, they can really dial it in for the left and right eye. Whereas if you're watching on a flat monitor, and if anybody's watched a show for a long time, I used to record from down in my theater. I have a front projection set up in a big screen, and it does 3D, and I watched like the 2 movies on it when I first got it and haven't tried it since. But whenever you're watching on a monitor, they can't really perfectly place the left and right eye. So what they do is it's really constrained in a way that it has to be, because you never know if someone's sitting off to a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left. Whereas in VR, you can, you know, especially if the IPD is set correctly, you can dial it in perfectly. So the VR effect itself is much more basically effective. So I do want to check it out, and one day I'm going to get to it when I don't have all these games to play. Chris, you don't have a PlayStation VR, and I know you probably don't even follow it that closely. Do you care about any of this?
It sounds cool. I remember notifications are super intrusive when I was in the PSVR demo. Like, aren't they locked to your head and stuff, Steve?
Well, well, they don't really have any notifications, but there are certain things. Initially, I remember when I tried the demo, where things would be, you know, kind of like you don't have the depth tracking. Like, so if you turn your head, some things remain static, which is real queasy, and that's one of the problems with notifications, I'm sure. But the consumer release of the PlayStation VR doesn't have any of that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, like, the best solution would be to have something on your hand, or like have like something like an Oculus thing or a PlayStation thing that goes across all apps. I don't know. Hopefully, we'll get there someday. I did watch Avatar in VR, not all of it, but like maybe 10-15 minutes worth on my Rift in, like, I think it was virtual desktop. That was really cool because the 3D is exact. So it makes 3D way better. Like, I have a 3D TV and I've used it here and there, but there's artifacts if you try to make it the real depth that it should be. So, like, yeah, for movies like Avatar and stuff, it's kind of a cool experience. Like, you can make it giant, so it's almost like you're in it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's ideal. And again, I'm going to check it out one day. Moving on, in our final news story, really this week is tested projections, and we refer to those guys a lot because they do really great work for VR, and they had a recent video where they brought Will Smith in from the Foo, and I don't really know much about who he is or what he does. I know he used to have that app. Maybe it's still there, and I remember checking it out where it was the Will Smith show or whatever. It's not the Will Smith that I was thinking of when I first saw it. It's not that Will Smith. It's a different Will Smith. But anyways, they brought him on, and the team with his app, they had gotten some early access to the Knuckles controller, so he brought it along, and you got to see Jeremy and as the other guy's name, Norm, play with the controllers, and they kind of got some close-up shots, and they talked about how it fit on the Knuckles, and a lot of commentary on it that I appreciated getting a more up-close look. And some of my personal takeaways from the video was that these still look very prototypey in the sense that the sensors were still open and exposed, like some of the early dev of the Vive itself, where we all know in our consumer versions, they got the clamshell and everything to fit over it, so you couldn't directly see any of the sensors. You only see the little cutout and the notches where they are. Well, these Knuckles controllers that these guys were using was the same way. The sensors were fully open and exposed, and that makes me concerned that Knuckles is further away than we all hope. And then one of the other takeaways for me was how well it connects to your hands and rests on your knuckles, and you don't fidget with it. Unlike with a Vive wand or a touch controller, you put your wrist through the strap if you're going to use the strap, and I don't use them for every game, but if you use a strap, then you kind of have to tighten it and you have to fidget with it. Whereas the knuckles, so long as you get it set once, it just slides right in and it's there. So I thought these two things were really, really nice, and I'm now more excited for the Knuckles after watching the video, but at the same time concerned that they're further away. Gary, did you watch the video? So it's a long thing. I didn't watch the whole thing. In the beginning, is really when you see a lot of the Knuckles details.
Yeah, it is long. It's about half an hour long, something like that. And this was sort of a continuation, because on this week's This Is Only a Test podcast, they had Will Smith on, and he was discussing some of his impressions with the Knuckles controllers on there as well. But this video, it almost seemed like not just a showcase for the Knuckles controllers, also as a showcase for what Will Smith is doing now. Because for anybody who doesn't know, Will Smith used to be on Tested. He used to be a member of the Tested team. In fact, I think he was one of the founders of that show as well. So, and you know, Will Smith, he gets a lot of stick about this being on the shows. Some people have a dislike of him being on there for whatever reason, but I think because he actually left Tested in order to pursue VR. And one thing that I noticed when he was on Tested, it's one of their first videos when they were talking about the HTC Vive, and you can tell, I mean, Will Smith, he was absolutely gobsmacked when he came out of a demo for the HTC Vive that first time. It was, I mean, he was really, really impressed with it. And he's somebody who doesn't really show he doesn't show too much enthusiasm for certain things, I would say. But in that particular video, he was really sort of impressed with it. And it speaks to how much enthusiasm he has for VR. But yeah, just to go back to this video, the Knuckles controllers themselves, this is the clearest picture I think we've had since they've been really revealed of how they work and how they look and how they attach onto your hands. And they look really, really good. They look really comfortable. And they were talking about the buttons that they have on. They have an extra button on there, which, you know, can presumably be used for various things, but the grip button on the standard Vive one is now split into 3 parts with capacitive touch on each of these parts, so you can grip at varying degrees as well. They look fantastic, and hopefully it'll bring us a little bit closer to what we're seeing in the Oculus touch controllers, because, you know, I've not shied away from this. I honestly think that the touch controllers are the better of the 2 controllers from the Vive and the Rift. But yeah, so hopefully we'll see more parity between the 2 controllers, because it would be great if we can have some kind of, one of the things I want to say, like Lone Echo, for example, I played that originally on my Vive Echo Arena, and it's just inconvenient to play it with those ones, whereas with the touch controllers it helps a lot, and hopefully these new Knuckles controllers will help.
Thanks for the explanation on who Will Smith was. I like how you said, for anyone who doesn't know who Will Smith was, and you really meant Steve, since you don't know who Will Smith is, I'm going to explain who he is. And that's fine, because I had no clue who he was. I did not watch Tested that far back.
No, there's people that don't know he was originally on Tested, but because he left actually when not long after I sort of got into that podcast and that show, so I just knew him from them. But then I went back onto their channel and checked out some of their early impressions of VR when they were first starting into this VR stuff, and it was really interesting to see his enthusiasm for it. Yeah,
Chris, did you see this video?
I did. I saw it. Yeah, I mean, I've even watched the first episode of the Foo Show, or I think, yeah, that's what it's called. It's cool because it's kind of Will Smith taking you through devs maps and like showing off assets and stuff. Like you'd be holding like a cup or whatever, and they'll talk about how they made it, and yeah, so that's kind of a cool little thing he has going on. In the second half, he kind of talks about how they're using VR for real-time animation on TV, and he said he had like a contract with Adult Swim to do something. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing from that video as well. So it kind of lets the actors just all be in the same room. It looks 2D, even though, you know, they're all interacting with each other. Yeah, but the controllers look great. I think the tracking will be, or the finger tracking will be greatly improved, you know, once the software becomes more final. So I'm excited for them. Yeah.
You know, like the finger tracking capabilities are impressive, but they're almost in the same space as the puck trackers and well, really, I guess just the puck trackers. Is there's nothing that I've seen software wise that will leverage it. Like with the touch, you have, you know, some gesture capability and it works pretty intuitively, but most games and most software do not leverage it. And I don't know if it's because they're looking for commonality with the Vive, and developers of a game don't want to go too far down the touch road because they know that will make it hard to translate to the Vive later on. And maybe once Knuckles is released, then more gesture hand things will be present, but so far I've not been too impressed. It's really only Lone Echo that stands out for me, where the pointing and the thumb and all that really kind of come into play a little better. So I'm a little cautiously optimistic with that gestures, as cool as it is, other than it visibly being seen. I'm not sure it'll be used in software too much.
Yeah,
I'm more interested in the rest of the benefits of the controller.
Yeah, I mean, Will Smith did flick people off in that video, so there's that. You can do that. Do that on the.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was referring to with the things that can be seen but not necessarily used. But you know, that's part of social. You know, VR social. You know, we interact with things, and part of those things that we interact with is other people, and a middle finger is universal. Like, I think it means the same thing in every language. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention on that video, there's something that was quite interesting when Will Smith was talking. He was saying how, because he started this foo show a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I don't know when it was, but I watched the first episode as well. But he doesn't seem to be doing a great deal with that anymore. And this video, he actually spoke to that. You know, he was saying that it seems like he can't get the funding or the investment in order to continue the show as it is. So he's sort of diverting his attention to different areas of VR in order to get some kind of funding to continue it, which is a shame, but I guess it's not really unexpected.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, we have some light notes to make. Hoverjunkers announced or teased really a single player campaign, and I'm very interested in this because I never really played Hoverjunkers, because by the time I was a couple months late getting my Vive last year, and at that time Hoverjunkers had already fell off in terms of its community engagement. And I wasn't willing to pony what at the time, I think it was $39 or $30. It was a pricier game at the time, still is by really today's standards on PC VR. And I never ponied up, so I never got to play it. And now a single player campaign has tempted me because I've always heard good things about it. Gary, I believe it was you that had put this on our list. And do you have Hoverjunkers, and did you play it?
No, I didn't. Again, like you, really, what it was a case of, because I did get my Vive relatively soon after launch, but the problem was this was an expensive title then on launch. And when you first get your Vive, there are so many free things and low price things that you can try that this one passed me by. And I've been meaning to pick it up for a while, but then after so many months, it got to the stage where people were saying the game's dead, you know, because it is a multiplayer game. At the moment, at least. So if there aren't other players in there, then you're not going to get a lot out of it. But I'd love to try a single player campaign on this. I just don't know. I've seen videos of the game and it doesn't look too I've got to be honest, it doesn't look too appealing to me as a player, but maybe with some kind of decent campaign, decent narrative in there, then I might be able to get something out of it. I hope they drop the price. I'm not too sure of the price at the moment, actually.
Yeah, and the teaser didn't make it necessarily look too great, because the teaser was just kind of a clunky thing. It looks like they quickly put together, and I'm hoping that since it's just a teaser, it isn't indicative of the final product. But the aesthetic of it really reminds me of Borderlands, and I think that look and that feel, both in visual look and in setting, both remind me of Borderlands, and I like that. And Starblood Arena for the PlayStation VR has a very similar look, and I really enjoyed it there. So I'll be very interested in checking it out if we get the opportunity. Chris, did you ever play Hoverjunkers?
Yeah, I played it, and I don't think I'd recommend buying it, unfortunately. It's kind of clunky, and like you said, like, it looks clunky and it feels really clunky. The controls aren't that intuitive. And the locomotion system was interesting back in the day, but I think we've kind of evolved past it. It was where the ship can only move, the ship can't rotate that you stand on, but it moves like this. So to rotate in the world, you have to just move around. But yeah, I played the game in my basement when I had I had two Vives down there. My friend brought his Vive over, and we both played, kind of split the play space in half and played with one set of lighthouses. So it's fun. It's fun multiplayer, but it's pretty clunky. I don't think I would buy it for single player, to be honest.
It's still, I've just checked on the price of it actually, and it is still the same price that I think it was released at. Over here it's £26.99, so it's still quite a expensive game, really.
Yep.
Yeah, people have been upset for a while. Like, they haven't communicated what they're doing, and we've been expecting this update for like half a year or longer, and they just haven't even replied. So I don't know. I'm kind of a little skeptical, but hopefully it'll be good.
It's like, and it's not just the developers of that game, but what can anyone do? Like, the VR is still admittedly a very small user base, and within that user base, only so many people are going to be even interested in playing something multiplayer. And then within that user base, they can move on to some other title. And it seems like Onward has been able to hold a community. Pavlov has been able to hold a community. But besides that, Dead and Buried, which is a game that everyone with a touch gets for free, I've had issues getting into a game with that one. It can be vacant at times. Echo Arena is still so new that we don't really know how that's going to pan out. And again, they ended up giving that away. So hopefully the idea there is to keep participation. As great as any of these games may be, it can be very challenging. And I mentioned Starblood Arena earlier. It has some of the similar problems. Although you can run through the stuff offline, it's still an arena-based game where you basically go through a series of deathmatch and team deathmatch, and it's struggled really bad at launch. Now, some of that was their own matchmaking, but even to this day, I can't just freely go in there and get into a match with that title. And it's something that I really hope VR solves, because if you're playing Call of Duty, like, you turn it on, you're going to be in a match. There's no issues there, and I understand that the user base is so much larger, but that doesn't take it away. Like, when you're asking $30 for a game and it's online only, like, people have to be able to play it, because it's just a bad situation to be in.
Yeah, I think the problem is if you're committing to this game, Hoverjunkers, for example, £27, you've got to know that you're going to get a decent amount of enjoyment out of it. And if the player base just isn't there to support it, then why would you go on and buy it? And I think this is just something fundamental at this point in VR, where these games that are purely multiplayer games, they will battle against this constantly. And you mentioned Onward. Onward is a great game, great experience, and it has a regular player base in there that are loyal to it and will keep on playing. You'll always find a match in Onward. But there's other things as well. Smaller games, 11 Table Tennis VR, you can always find a match in 11 as well. So I think it's just what people catch on to, but it's a fundamental problem with anything which is multiplayer only. And I know that a lot of developers are going for some multiplayer games because I guess they take less resources in order to develop. You don't have to create some kind of narrative, some kind of 10-hour-long narrative behind the scenes or anything like that. It's you throw people in there and what happens. So I can understand developers being gravitated towards this kind of game, but at the same time, I think the ones that are going to succeed, other than the exceptions like Onward, will be the ones that will have a multiplayer component tacked on to a single player game like Echo Arena.
Yep, I think it's a given, and I think the developers of Hoverjunkers, and I don't have their name right here, so I don't know, and I'm sorry for that. But I think they've realized that they're probably not going to get any notable additional sales if they don't can give some sort of assurance that any buyers will actually have something to play. I can only imagine how frustrated I'd be if I'd spent $30, gotten a game, and then couldn't play it. So. All right, moving on. I wanted to talk about some upcoming games. I'm not going to spend much time on them, but I think going forward, I'd like to see as a segment on our show where we just kind of briefly bring up new announcements. But it just turns out this week they're all PlayStation VR. But probably the biggest is Radial G has been announced for PlayStation VR, and it's actually coming on disc. As well, so they're treating it as a bigger type release. It's coming out on September 12th digitally, and I think September 15th on disc in the in Europe, in the Europe markets, and a future date here in the US. So Radial G is a game that's been out on Steam for a while. I've personally not played it. It's set in the sort of a futuristic F-Zero or Wipeout type look and feel to it. So I know a lot of people were looking forward to that one. And then moving on, there are 3 other games, and I don't have release dates on all of them. You Are Being Followed is a very stylized exploration game coming to the PlayStation VR. It's not dated, but you take place as you play as you're a blind woman. Now, obviously, the game isn't just total darkness. Wouldn't make much sense for VR if that was the case. But I'm sure you're having some sort of neural visions or something, and it looks pretty interesting. Manifest 99 is coming out on September 12th. And it's another stylized looking game, very, very cartoony, and looks pretty good. I don't have much to say because, again, I've not played any of these. They're not out yet. And then lastly, Soul Dimension is coming out next week on August 22nd. And this is a surprise announcement. The developer is Keen Vision. And it's not very clear due to some publishing arrangements, but they may be the developer for Ancient Amuletter. But the publisher here at least in North America sometimes gets credit, and I honestly haven't been able to suss out who's who exactly, but Keen Vision is a Chinese developer, and I'm pretty sure they did Ancient Amuletter. But Soul Dimension comes out next week. It looks very interesting, almost a horror type game. So all these I put on the list are, I think, worth checking out, at least looking into as potential buys. So moving on from there, we are ready to get into some games talk. Chris, I know you had mentioned before the show that maybe you were going to bow out because you really haven't played much, and you're on mute.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I've been. I mean, it's really beautiful. I'm by the ocean, so I haven't had the space or the time to play VR. So I'll probably sign out here, but I'll see you guys next week, and I'll play some games. I'm actually going to be in my apartment, so it's going to be great.
Okay. So, we'll see you next week, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Chris.
Bye.
So, Gary, you want to launch us into our first game?
Yeah, we can talk about probably one of the biggest releases this week is SoulKeeper VR. And this is one that's been in the background for a long time. I remember seeing videos about this sort of going back probably over a year now, maybe something like that. And always, you know, when you first see the videos of this game, it's very, very impressive. The graphics look incredible in this VR game. And, you know, it didn't let me down. It was released in the early access last week. We did receive a key for it, so we've had a little sort of look around this game. in terms of graphics, it really doesn't let you down. It looks incredible in the headset. I mean, I'm running it on a quite a high spec PC, so I am super sampling it, so that obviously helps as well. But even if you're not, I think the graphics are not just really clear. They've also got a level of detail. They've got some details in this game which I think make it stand out. Overall, the game is a little bit first impressions wise, I'd say it's a little bit of a disappointment, only because there's performance problems in this, quite big performance problems actually. As I said, I'm running it on quite a high spec PC, and on that I'm running into some problems. Now on the Steam page, it actually has a minimum spec of a GTX 1060 and a recommended of a 1070. Now possibly if you're not super sampling at all, you could maybe run it to some capacity in that, but I'm not 100% sure how well it would run. I'd need to try it out. Before I go on to some other points I've got, Steve, I want to just talk to you about the performance, because this is one of the main complaints that people have about the game. What's your experience on this?
So I tried it briefly on the Vive, and I had some stuttering, and like you, I have a 1080 Ti, and I have a i7 4790K, which is several years old now, but it was the top of line processor in its generation, and it's by no means a slouch. And yeah, there are performance problems. But then I also tried it on the Rift, and it played better, but I have to suspect that it's because asynchronous space warp is kicking in, and I'm just not paying that close attention to it, because I'm also trying to pay attention to the game and learn it and take in its, as you say, very beautiful settings. I don't think I'm going out on much of a limb in saying this, but this is maybe the best looking VR game, period. If it's not there, it's a short distance between it and second place. Like, it is a gorgeous game. And with that, it brings up an interesting point, because you said, you know, I'm super sampling. Again, we both have 1080 Ti's, but as games evolve, super sampling is something that's done when you have overhead. But if these games start becoming more and more visually demanding, you and I and everyone else that's super sampling are going to have to come to the realization that we might one day have to stop super sampling. And this may be the first time that we have to look at that. So if I went back to a 1.0 multiplier in Steam VR and played this game, would I think it is as good looking as, say, Lone Echo, that I'm super sampling at effectively 2.25? If you translate the Oculus super sampling to the Steam super sampling, would it look as good then? I'm not sure, but performance-wise, I found the game playable on a Rift, and again, I have to assume it's because the asynchronous space warp was kicking in.
Yeah. I did try it on the Rift as well, and it ran much better, I've got to say. Yeah, I think that's possibly the reason. So I've actually held off playing too much of this game, because I want to wait until it's got some patches out there that improve performance. And also, some people have mentioned some bugs. Now, I haven't personally come across any bugs so far, but I've played a very small amount of the game because, like I say, I want to hold back and wait until it's running a little bit better so I can enjoy it a little bit more, because, like I said, this is a game that I've known about for a long time, and I've really been looking forward to. Let me just go back to the graphics for 1 second, because it's not just the fact that the graphics are sort of sharp or that they've got great textures on there. They're also putting in a level of detail that I've not seen in too many other games as well. When you first start in that opening room and you've got the birds just sitting outside the window, but also when you progress through that first part of the game and you can look up into the rafters and see all these intricate details on the architecture, you can tell all these things have been sort of very, very carefully designed, and they're not just thrown together. They're not just sort of flat polygons with detailed textures on. They've actually been generated in a very careful way. And I think this speaks to part of what I want to say about this game is, at this stage, it's got problems. But just looking at the attention to detail that the developer's been putting in at this early stage, hopefully, if they continue with this, which I hope they will, it will get to a point where the game will be much better performing, and you know, you can get a lot out of it. At the moment, maybe you can speak to I know you're a little bit further in this game than me, Steve, but at the moment, what I'm experiencing in this game, in spite of its problems, is the fact that I love the world building. I love the fact that I love these little birds that are outside the window, all this attention to detail, making you feel like you're in this living, breathing world. So for me, I know it's got problems and it's got a lot of criticism at the moment, but I'm going to stick with it. I really am. And when we get these keys, we obviously get the game for free and we can try them out. And it's difficult once you've done that to try and put yourself into the position of just a general consumer who will have to pay £30, $40 for this game. And I'm really, really trying hard to put myself in that position in order to speak now about it, because in all honesty, I can't in good conscience recommend this game in its current form, because it's an expensive game. Now, if this game worked perfectly, the performance was great, and it didn't have any of these bugs, I would absolutely wholeheartedly recommend. From the little I've played, I would definitely recommend it for the price that it's going for, because of these small things that I don't see a great deal in VR, these little details. And one thing before I pass it over to you, Steve, as well, this is not a game that's, sometimes we're used to seeing it in VR, these games where they are sort of thrown together almost by sort of indie developers. As much respect as I have for them, there are some people out there that will develop a game and then throw on a layer of high quality graphics over the top, and people will be impressed by that. I don't get the impression that this is that game. This game has a level of depth to it beyond the graphics, which, if they can sort out some of these problems, I think it will make it one of my personal favorite games. But it's not even close to that at the moment because of these problems that I mentioned.
Yeah, there's so much to like with what they've done, and I agree with how you closed out your commentary there, in that this isn't just this may be a indie or a small development team, a relatively small development team, compared to, say, I don't know, Uncharted, Naughty Dog, or some big developer. I think perhaps they like their eyes were a little bit too wide, and they bit off a little more than they could chew in terms of scope and what they're trying to accomplish. Because if we look at I'll compare it to, say, Mage's Tale. Mage's Tale was done by an experienced, relatively decent sized developer. They've made a lot of games over the years, and what they did with that game is you were more restricted to, say, spell casting. Actually, you don't even cast. There's no gesture casting. You pick a spell from a palette and then you throw it. There are no melee in Mage's Tale. There is no shield in Mage's Tale. There is no staff in Mage's Tale, but all of that is present in SoulKeeper, and they wanted melee, and they wanted spell casting, and they wanted gestures where you craft the spell via a gesture instead of pulling it from a palette. And mix that with an open world and these very, very detailed graphics, and it quickly, I could see that it became a project that maybe they lost control over a little bit in terms of meeting timelines and having to stay on budget. It was probably a nightmare for whoever's running the project. That said, I love the design that they've done. Like this is sort of the RPG that a lot of people are looking for. I would love to see the inclusion of a leveling system, some hit points, being able to maybe upgrade armor, and maybe that stuff is further into the game, and I just haven't gotten that far. But that's the one thing I see missing in terms of project scope. And it's kind of keeping it in scope. Now, within the execution is where they start to make their mistakes. They just simply don't seem to have enough time to sort out a lot of the bugs. We were talking before we started recording the show. The sword, for example, if I pick up the sword and hold it up high, the inverse kinematics are wrong, and it doesn't affect the usability of the sword in any way. It'll still strike the enemy, and it'll still hit them, but it pulls you out of it when you see your wrist pointing up to the sky, as opposed to pointing down towards your body. So the inverse kinematics are really wrong. There were several just little buggy type things that indicate that there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'm in a very similar spot that you are, Gary, and I love how you said it, honestly, because you know, we got the game for free and we want to try to put ourselves in the position of the consumer, and like you, if you have to be choosy with what titles you spend your money on, I'd say put SoulKeeper in your wish list and keep a track on it, because if they are able to actually execute on this scope, it'll be one of the best games in VR. It's simply breathtaking. It's so many options, with the combat, the ways that you can go about, you know, approaching a group of enemies. It's got a narrative. It's so much done right, but it's also broken. And I almost hate to say it. Like, I feel like I am obligated to try to lift this game up fictitiously, but I'm not, and I won't. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on, and I don't also recommend actually purchasing it yet. Now, on the other hand, if you're the type of consumer that buys dang near everything, and maybe you have a little more liquidity to your free spending, and you just want to see how awesome this game looks and track its progress, then yes, I can recommend it from a early access sort of beta mentality, and you just kind of want to be on the inside with this title.
Yeah, I said before, you know, this was a title that I'd seen a long time ago, and I have been looking forward to it. And in some ways, I feel like I'm still looking forward to it. I'm still looking forward to the promise of the game, but it's not there yet. And it's difficult to recommend £30 at this early stage. But at the same time, you know, if these developers, one thing I will say as well, they are being very communicative on Steam and on Reddit, I believe, where they're talking to people about this, and they've already pushed one update that was supposed to improve performance, although it didn't make a great deal of difference to me. And just a couple of other things, just some more little criticisms. The audio is very, very flat. It doesn't sound, it doesn't seem to have any sort of spatial audio or anything like that. Everything, all the voices that you hear from these NPCs are just sort of in your ears. That they don't feel like they're any distance at all. So I don't like that part, and that's something that I've seen in some other games as well. And the other thing is the hand position, and I spoke to you. You're probably sick of me talking about hand position in VR games, but I mentioned this on a private forum that we've got, that hand position in this game is a little bit of a bugbear for me. In the Vive controllers, they feel completely wrong. They're in a position where it's almost as if the Vive controllers are the arms, the ones are the arms, and then the hand is just sticking out of the end of the Vive controllers, rather than being representative of your hand position in real life, which is how I like it. Now, when I tried it on the Rift, again, they're still not right. The hand position on the Vive when you're holding the sword is great. It's perfect there, and I guess that's what they went for, but it doesn't feel right in everything else, and it's an annoyance and a problem that I wish we could just somehow edit the hand position in settings.
Do you think, now I felt that too, and I normally don't hone in on it like you do. Do you think it's a consequence of the inverse kinematics being incorrect? Because at times, like naturally, like if you come in with nothing turned and your wrist perfectly straight, like it'll feel okay. And I took time playing with this because it was really one of the first times I really noticed it. But as soon as I turned my wrist or grabbed something, because the inverse kinematics were wrong, it made the hand feel wrong. The wrist was coming from a different direction than what your physical wrist was. So you had that disconnection between what you knew was your natural hand versus what you were seeing with your eyes. And I think also part of it may be coming from Lone Echo, where they absolutely nailed this element, knocked it out of the park, that everything else is going to be a step down. It just makes me wonder if it's less to do with the hand position and more to do with the kinematics.
It's possible. Yeah, I think that definitely plays a part on it, because when you do grab things, and because the way they've rendered the hands in this, you have your hand, but then you have a fair bit of the forearm as well. So if you're moving that around slightly, your forearm will sort of move in an unnatural way in the game. So I'm sure the inverse kinematics plays a part in this, but just in general, just when you're standing there with your hands in front of you with the Vive ones, I feel like they're not in the right position to where I want them to be. And some games, you know, some games do get this absolutely perfect, and yet others just seem to rely on the position of the Vive ones as if they are your hands. They're not your hands. Your hands are resting on the Vive ones, and that's where I want my hands to appear in game.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I don't have much more to say about this. Do you want to move on, or do you have anything else?
Now we can move on to the next one.
All right, the next one is a game we previewed last week, also, again, something we got keys for, and that's Killing Floor Incursion by Tripwire. And I've actually completed this game all the way to the end, which is sort of unusual this early on after getting a game. So I'm going to go ahead and just send it to you first so that you can give your feedback, and then I'll go into it. So.
I've not played as much as you, but I did go into it again a couple more times since the last show. I'm sort of towards the end of the second level now. I think there's only 4 levels in total from what I've heard about this game.
Yeah.
So I'm going through it. I'm enjoying it. I don't know whether I'm going to sort of persevere and push through this game and see it through to the end. There's a problem I have with this game, but let me first say, you know, there's no question this game is absolutely very, very polished, very well made. And if you enjoy this game, this type of game, I can't see you disliking this. Everything seems to be so well done in this. And you know, I like sort of horror games and these types of games that give me jump scares. I just feel like it's been done to death a little bit in VR, and this is what's sort of dissuading me from carrying on with this game. I played Paranormal Activity, and I sort of pushed through, and I enjoyed that game. I thought it had a great little narrative in it, and I played through that no problems. This one, I feel like I'm experiencing, I'm feeling the same things as what I had a lot of the time in some of these other horror games. You're killing zombies in this, and in Arizona Sunshine, you're killing zombies, but the environment and the atmosphere of Arizona Sunshine, for whatever reason, you know, it's a sunny environment, and it was just a more pleasant place to be. And this is one of the problems with VR. You're placing yourself within these games, within these environments. And I want to more and more, I feel like I want to be in sort of just places that I enjoy being in, rather than being in these dark, horrible environments. And the more I play these types of games, the less I feel like playing them. You know, like I say, Paranormal Activity, I enjoyed that and I went through it. It wasn't a pleasant place to be, but I enjoyed it and I persevered. This one, I feel like I'm just being worn out with these types of experiences.
Okay, I with you having listened to what you just described, I say you need to push on with it, because it's not a horror game. It is an action shooter zombie game, and I think they started out, particularly that first level in the they call it the farmhouse level, but it was really dark. It was in the woods, and you get to the house, and things are creeping up on you, and there's jump scares. As you progress, and if you're in the second level, which is a catacombs level, it's much brighter than the first level, but it's still a dank place. From there on out, you go to brighter spots. Now, it's not quite as bright as Arizona Sunshine because it's not the Arizona desert and the sunshine shining on you, but it brightens up, and it doesn't feel like a horror game. It feels like a like I need to shoot and survive. And honestly, like a lot of people have compared this that I've read in various places, and most notably, I guess, being Reddit. They've kind of wanted to compare this to Arizona Sunshine itself. And for me, it's kind of 1A and 1B. I really don't like one more than the other. I think Killing Floor is a really, really good game. It feels good. The play feels good. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't have its issues for me. There were a couple times I was hung up on the puzzles in a frustrating sort of Wilson's Heart kind of way that felt a little unnecessary, but the action itself just felt so right. The gunplay felt right. Like there are segments, and not going to spoil it too much for you, Gary, but you get a sniper rifle, and it reminds me of that scene in Saving Private Ryan, where you're just up in the bell tower popping off the zombies, and it's a completely different tone from the farmhouse. Like nothing. It almost seems like it could be a different game. The weapon feels different. The setting is different. The Zeds themselves are the only real continuity there. So I am recommending it as a VR zombie / Zed shooting game to compare it to the Killing Floor franchise. And I personally have not played them, but I will just echo a lot of the sentiments that I've gathered from just paying attention to the community. Apparently, this doesn't completely resemble a Killing Floor game. A Killing Floor game is a non-narrative horde multiplayer co-op, just kind of wave shooter, and the zombies, the Zeds and the other creatures, they just stack up on the floor, killing floors, just a massive bodies all over the place. In this game, I don't know if it's due to VR performance or if it's due to just where they wanted to go with the design and narrative, but when you shoot a creature, a couple seconds later, it will digitize out because the whole narrative is taking place within a simulation. So it is like perhaps a little on the short side, but I still think most people will get 3 to 4 hours out of it. So it does kind of make it the price per hour. If you look at games that way, it does make it a bit on the expensive side. But if you don't look at it that way, it's a very polished, very complete experience. The final boss was fantastic, while also annoying. It had some of the annoying game tropes in it. It's like, oh god, I gotta do this. But looking at it and visually, it was really cool. And there's choices that you make, and they don't really amount to much. But at the end, you have to make a choice that fits within the narrative. And again, it doesn't really matter to squat. But it still feels like it belongs, and it gives it a sense of purpose, which is something I personally always talk about. So I like this game, and again, I've already completed it. And going back to what we said about SoulKeeper, perhaps it's easy for me to say that I like it because I didn't pay anything for the game, and I'm trying to keep that in perspective. But I think it is a very good game, and there's really not a lot that I could say bad about it. It works, and it's shooting, and it's just I found it fun.
Yeah, well, that's part of my problem. And just hearing you talking about it, actually, Steve, just say that you go to these different environments, maybe it's a different tone later on in the game. That will make me sort of continue, and I will sort of go through this a little bit more based on that. But the other thing is, like you say, the gunplay is very, very good in this game. Performance is very good as well. It's not often that I can go into a VR game and just be confident about the experience it's going to be giving me in terms of the polish, performance. Everything feels great in this game, but it's mainly my impressions of it that I mentioned before are mainly due to just the sense that I'm just in a place I don't really want to be in. And like I say, it's difficult because there's always going to be horror games, and I'm sure I want to play some more horror games in VR as well. I just feel like I'm overwhelmed by them in some ways.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I wonder what made them choose to start there, because it's such a separate tone, and it may be the narrative that they wanted to give it. Now, there are some gripes that I do have with it, and I kind of blanked out on them for momentarily, but picking up objects is a pain. And I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. I've tried using my finger to point at it using the touch controller, and it's just sometimes when you want to pick an object up off the ground, whether it be a health pack or an ammo pack, you just can't walk over it like a traditional game. You have to actually intently pick it up, which means in order to do that, you can't have a weapon in the hand that you're trying to pick it up with. But when you can pick an object up, it'll kind of highlight blue, and you'll see a little trace come from your hand, letting you know that you can, if you squeeze the grip, you can pick it up. And I just found that finicky. And then I also found that so by default, the game puts your pistols sort of up high on your chest, like an undercover detective under a jacket holster, rather opposed to being on your waist. But there's a setting to move it to your waist. So I moved it to my waist, but I found that something was wrong. Whenever I'd look down, or without looking, would try to feel to my waist to grab my pistols, I couldn't reliably grab them. So I moved it back to the chest where it was far more reliable, but it just felt weird to reach right here towards my armpit to grab a pistol.
I'm with you.
So that was a little clunky. They could probably polish that stuff up, but all in all, it's a good game. I'm gonna go ahead and give the next honors to you.
Okay. Well, I want to talk about Aircar. Now, this is a free demo that came out on Oculus last week, and I saw some screenshots of this that people had put up, and I assumed, you know, you hear these words, these free experience, these free demo that's available, and immediately your expectations are lowered by this. So when I saw these screenshots of this game, this experience, I assumed it was sort of an on-rails, impressive graphically, very impressive graphically, but it was sort of an on-rails experience. Well, that's not the case. I downloaded this, and what it is, you're presented with this this craft, this Aircar, I guess it is, that you're sitting in. The cockpit looks great, and you then get to fly around this city, this very, very well rendered city, futuristic kind of aesthetic. And you have full control over this car, where you're going, you know, and the experience really is just for you to fly around and explore this city. Now, there's not a lot beyond that, so that's where your expectations need to be sort of kept in line. But with that in mind, when I first played this, I was really impressed. The graphics, first of all, are very, very good. And I've since learned that the person who developed this is a 3D graphic artist. And they created this as sort of like a showcase, I guess, for their art. But also they wanted to create some kind of interactivity with this. So they gave you full control over the car. But it was sort of, they had limited experience of coding. So that's why it's sort of limited in scope at the moment. Now, like I say, graphics are very, very good, but it's not just the graphics that make this. Everything about it is very, very immersive. This is one of the best senses of presence I've had in any VR experience for whatever reason. Now, it might be something to do with the weather, the tone of the city. You've got these. It's sort of an overcast day in this city that you're flying around, and you've got rain that hits your window in this cockpit, and the cockpit you're sitting in is actually quite big, but you see these little droplets of rain hitting the window as you're flying around, and this all adds to the experience. It's absolutely incredible, really. I mean, I don't want to oversell it, but I've got to say I was really, really impressed with this. Now, the developer is planning on creating some kind of game out of this demo, and they want to sort of incorporate some kind of missions, racing challenges, multiplayer if possible. And for me, if they were to do that, then absolutely I'd purchase this, because there's something about it, just something about flying around this city, that it's not just that you're flying around, it's the fact that it's detailed as well, and everything looks the way you want it to look. I'm struggling to get it across, but like I say, it's free, so give it a try.
Right. So I saw a lot of people talking about this, so it wasn't anything on my radar, and after seeing people talk about it, I gave it a go, and yeah, my response is similar to yours. I was like, holy cow, this is cool. It's Aircar. It takes place apparently in the future of some kind, where cars are flying, or there's some vehicle of some kind, and it's a craft, I guess, an air car. But visually, it just looks incredible. This is the city that is out at sea on these floating platforms, and you have skyscrapers. It kind of looks like the Sears Tower in Chicago or something. And it all looks so good. Now, there's nothing to do other than to fly around the city, but I probably spent 15, 20 minutes doing that. And again, this is free, so there's no reason to not check it out. And it's certainly worth your time, because that's the one thing that it does cost you is time. And it looks good, it feels good, everything's right about it. Now, if they could turn this into a world, turn this into a game, I would be very interested in that. It felt really great. And I actually flew off. So you have the main city that you're around, and it's not too terribly large, but then you see off in the distance, you see these what looks like abandoned cities, and I actually flew all the way to one of them. And it lets you go. I was expecting to run into an invisible wall like in Truman Show or something, and it forced me to turn around, but it actually let me fly all the way into the distance. And I visited some of the sort of abandoned cities that really wasn't to life. It wasn't much going on there, but I just thought it was cool that I could do that. And
yeah,
and then I flew back. You can use the game with I played it on the Rift. Is it available on Steam? Do you know?
I don't believe so. No, I think it's only on the Oculus store at the moment. But yeah, I think you can play it with Revive though.
Yeah, the developer is Giant Form. That's the name of the company. If you go to their webpage, there's nothing there other than Aircar. And this is a free game, so hopefully they're able to leverage what is a very good kind of starting base and find a way to monetize it, because it's very nice.
Part of the reason I just like this game so much, it's like so many other things that I experience in VR that I like. It's not the fact that where they are at that moment that I like, it's the fact that it shows some kind of potential for VR. And this game, again, what's there is very, very impressive, but it's quite basic. Like you say, you're just flying around a city. But at the same time, while I'm playing this, I'm just constantly thinking of the potential of this type of game and what they could do within this very simple framework and where they could go. And hopefully they will expand upon this. I mean, part of the ideal game I would love for something like this is where you could play some kind of do sort of basic missions like in Elite Dangerous, where you can fly down to a building, collect packages, take them to different parts of the city, and obviously there's things that are preventing you from doing that. The other aspect of this is I'd love it where you could sort of combine several kinds of game within this framework, where you're not just flying this car around, but you can also get out and walk around on foot and go into buildings and speak to NPCs. This is the kind of thing that I'm imagining when I'm playing this game. So what's there is great. It's a very, very good base, and I hope that they'll create some of these things that I've spoke about. Obviously, I think I'm being a little bit too optimistic if I think they're going to create some kind of open world.
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
All right, the next thing I'm going to talk about, we actually have quite a long list, and I don't know if we're going to get to all of it, but it's all positive. A lot of small experiences that I really enjoyed. So the one I'm going to choose next is Lucky Night Texas Hold'em Poker. Now, this is a free title on Steam, and kind of similar to Aircar. It's like, oh great, it's free. Like we don't have enough time to play all the monetized titles. Like this free crap is just kind of in the way now. But no, this was really good. Now I enjoy playing Texas Hold'em. I've played it for a long time, not so much anymore in terms of going to a casino or for money. But it's a game that from time to time I enjoy to play socially. So again, this is a free title on Steam. You launch the game up, and it has a very brief tutorial that you can do in 120 seconds. It's very short. You go in the casino, it automatically puts you at a seat, and you'll play with bots. So I'm told, if there aren't any people to immediately pair you with, but my entire time with it, I was always paired with human players, and you're playing Texas Hold'em at a casino with a dealer with a really well done system. It's motion control, so like when you want to flip over and peek at your cards, you do so. When you want to fold, you grab your cards and you throw them into the middle of the table. When you want to bet or raise with your chips, you go over your chips and a slider shows up and you can choose the amount that you want to raise, and then you throw them in. And meanwhile, you're sitting at this this poker table, and everyone has their avatar where you can choose outfits and you can choose your gender, and there's voice chat, and you can click on someone's character and you can view how many rounds they played and how many what their win percentage is. So it's a very deep experience. But one of the things I like aesthetically, it was very cartoony, in the vein of like maybe a Pixar type film. But the whole presentation and the polish around it was really nice. Like when it was another player's turn, behind the table and behind the dealer is a really large in-game flat monitor, kind of like what you would see at a football arena or something, where they can do close-ups, and it would close up on the player whose turn it was, and you would see them make all of their gestures and everything. So all in all, this is like, for a free game, you could get, like, I played it one time, and that was earlier today, and I played it for an hour and a half. So
wow.
for a free thing, like, I don't get that out of some paid experiences. And if you like Texas Hold'em, now I don't think they're going to take this to a place where you can actually gamble real money. But of course, it made me think of it, because I know there's those websites where you can go out there and actually gamble actual dollars, and you're opening yourself up to gaming commissions and governments and all sorts of problems. But if ever it got to a place where you could play like this with money, I would probably give it a go, just because it was such a good experience. And whenever you're playing with real money, it ups the ante a bit. People are less aggressive, because when you have unlimited money, you know, you're like raise on your 2-7.
People they play differently, a lot differently. I'm just looking at the video of this on the Steam page. Actually, it looks really good. I'm going to give this a try as well, actually.
So is Texas Hold'em I thought maybe I didn't know if it was like a cultural thing, but is it popular over there?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's quite popular over here as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah, me and a few friends used to play it. I don't play. I mean, I did actually play it online. I didn't sort of gamble with real money, but I used to go onto some websites and play a little bit online and stuff like that. And I like the game. I think it's really good. And this, I mean, I've always been interested in where this will take this kind of stuff in VR. I think some people have mentioned this before, and I think some people actually specifically mention it in reference to things like eye tracking and, you know, facial expressions being read within VR as well, because these are all things that can affect how the game is played, these particular types of games. But I'm definitely going to give this a try.
Yeah, I think it would be neat to for them to expand upon that. Maybe that's their plan, because it's titled Lucky Night : Texas Hold'em Poker. So like, if they expanded upon it, they could have Lucky Night Blackjack, Lucky Night, and, you know, name the casino game. I guess it would have to be a game where you're competitive against other players, because if you were just competitive against the house, maybe it wouldn't be as enjoyable. But still, it's worth checking out. And again, it's free. Yeah,
looks good. Okay, well, I'll go next. I wanted to talk about this Earthquake Simulator VR, which we received a key for. And this is just quite a short experience, and it's mainly designed as like a educational experience, which presumably will want to be shown in something like schools and museums. That's really where they want to place this kind of stuff. But what it is, it's just a earthquake simulator. You know, what it's telling you is these are the protocols that you have to go to in order to be safe during an earthquake, to maximize the safety during that kind of situation. So it's presented, you find yourself, when you first go into this, you'll find yourself in a house, a bedroom, which is very, very nicely rendered, actually. You know, some of these presumably lower budget experiences, they seem to have very, very basic rendering, but this looks great. I've got to say, that's one thing I will say. But the experience itself is probably only about 10 minutes long, and what it gets you to do is you'll see a news report of impending earthquake, and it will tell you what to do through this reporter. It will say these are the things you need to do to be safe, and then you're away and you have to walk around this house, collect various things in order to create this sort of safety kit, and then the earthquake will strike, and you have to basically do what it tells you. Now, obviously, this is an experience as a VR, as a fan of VR games and VR experiences. This is quite a basic one. This is really designed for people that are new to VR, that are not used to being in virtual reality and just want to be given a guide on this kind of stuff. Like I say, it's an educational kind of experience. And I think it does its job very, very well. It's a good way of presenting this kind of safety procedure to people that I guess it would be more of an impact to experience this kind of stuff, to learn about the safety procedures during an earthquake through this experience rather than just being told it. And I guess that's really what they're aiming for. In terms of a VR enthusiast playing this, it's probably not going to give you a great deal, if I'm being honest, but for the audience it's aimed for, I think it does a very good job, a better job than I was expecting.
Yeah, I didn't give, I haven't had a chance to do that one, but I think there's a place for that type of stuff. As a, you know, as I think and through my career and you know, one of the things I do for my job, and all the trainings that I see people within my company have to go through, whether it be CPR or, you know, I'm always having to do those things too in management. And, you know, where do I look for my staff in the event of a fire drill, or where do I take and do roll call for, you know, in the event of a tornado drill. So those types of things, if we could get to a place where enterprise could train people that way, and kids, you know, kids do these things in schools too, like they have to do these drills. And I think this idea can go a long way in a world where VR is untethered and cheaper, you know, like tablets or something, which I think most schools are giving tablets now to their students. Maybe there's a world where we have VR goggles that most people just kind of have or are expected to have, and they can do all training that way. It makes a lot of sense. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the upcoming movie based on Stephen King's It. I don't, you know, the original movie I know I've seen in some capacity, probably a knock on my parents. I probably shouldn't have seen it at the age I did, but I don't really recall it. I don't remember squat about it, but it's a Stephen King movie who does more, I guess we could call it horror, but I guess in today's terms, they're not really horror. Like Pet Sematary isn't that scary in today's terms, but it certainly at the time it would fit in sort of the psychological horror genre. But a reboot of the movie, and I don't know if it's titled It Float is the name of it, but there's a VR experience available, a video-based experience, and it's called It Float, based on Stephen King's It novel. And you can watch it. Now, I watched it through Oculus's video app. I've come to learn that that's probably not the way I should have done it. On YouTube, it is available in 8K, which I didn't know YouTube had 8K. That's a lot more than 4K.
Yeah.
So now I'm wishing I would have ripped it from YouTube and then loaded it up in a virtual desktop or something. So that's probably the way you should go about watching this if you haven't watched it yet. But it's a video experience. It's a 3-dimensional video experience. So it's left eye, right eye. And it's a really good one. Now, the quality, again, where I streamed it from the Oculus video app wasn't that good, and it suffers from a lot of the problems 360 video in VR 3D is. But the scope, it's a word we're using a lot today, what they actually set out to do in this video was actually a very deep experience for what it was. You move about and it's quite long, and I thought it was a really good video experience. It just had not so good resolution. So I'm probably going to try this again at this higher fidelity. The problem is you got to go through all sorts of hassles to accomplish that. Maybe I'll do it on PlayStation VR, where you can just go straight into the YouTube app. But nope, it won't do 8K though. So what did you think of it, Gary? I'm kind of getting bogged down by this 8K concept.
No, well,
more so than the app itself.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I didn't know about that. But I watched this through Virtual Desktop, and I just put the link into the YouTube video, and it downloads it in Virtual Desktop before you watch it. So I just watched it that way. I didn't go through the extra hoops in order to get it at the high resolution. So maybe I need to go back and do that again, because the only criticism I have about this is the resolution. It didn't look great, but going through it, it's pretty good. I've got to say that they did a pretty good job on this. You know, we're used to these kinds of things now, these 360 videos, and this is probably one of the better ones that I've seen, but it's not great. It's just where we are at the moment in VR and these 360 videos. But yeah, it's definitely worth having a look at. And if I'm going to have a look at this 8K thing as well, see if I can sort that out. But yeah, because it was just the resolution.
So this works. So, you know, we've talked about these in the past. And so this one actually worked in its intended promotional ways, because I did not know that this movie was a thing, and that it was this close to release. It comes out in a few weeks, I think. So hey, now it's a movie that I'll look forward to watching, because I in general like what Stephen King does, and I don't know how closely he is on this project, and because it was a relatively good experience. It's no Miyubi,
no.
You know, like Miyubi holds the torch for sure, but it's certainly one of the better ones. I liked it way more than the Alien Covenant experience. It's quite a bit longer. So one of the other things I want to talk about, and I don't think you gave it a go, Gary, but it's also available on Oculus Home, is the Raven VR, and it's a free experience. And really, what it is, it's a reading of the Edgar Allan Poe poem, but it's within a rendered environment, and the environment is based on the description of the poem itself. You know, if you're familiar with it, you know, the raven, it comes in the window and is on the bust above the door, that all happens. There's not a lot, there's no interactivity, you have no embodiment, but you are just in this small home, this room really, and you have all of those things, and there's the fire, and there's the portrait of his beloved hanging over the fire, and it was a neat experience. I would say people that are more into poetry and literature would probably get a lot out of it. As a person, I'm not really into those things from my hobbyist or an artistic perspective, but I still enjoyed it. In the person, and I meant to write his name down, Barry something. He's the one that actually did the voice acting, did the reading, and he knocked it out of the park. Like, he nailed this. Like, I want him to do more things in VR and in gaming in general, because he has a very good voice and was able to highlight and show exclamation when reciting this very well. So it's a free experience. It's worth checking out. It maybe only takes 10-15 minutes, and you get some exposure to a poem if you've never had that exposure, and it looks good, and it's an interesting and a different use of the medium, which are things that I'm drawn to all the time, because we understand VR can do games, and we understand that it can do video, albeit poorly currently, but additional usages and bringing other forms of content to life is something that may get the mainstream to get interested in VR, because not everyone is a gamer.
Yeah. I know that poem. It's quite a famous poem by Edgar Allan Poe, but I only actually really know that from the Simpsons episode. That there's an episode of the Simpsons Halloween special where Homer's placed in this room, and they're doing this poem, and yeah, there's a little section on there. So that's really where my experience of the Raven. But I'll probably give this a try, because it's something I'm interested in trying. All of these little things, these little things that people are trying, all these different things, you know, because we're used to playing these games, and everybody complains about wave shooters, horror games, all these things that we're getting again and again, and it's just interesting to have these little diversions like Aircar and the Raven, just to see what's on offer, where these things will take us.
Absolutely. And I enjoy being able to take these asides and say, okay, today, instead of booting up Alien Isolation and playing it for an hour, I'm going to try this, and this different experience.
Yeah.
So that's always still great. And the last thing I just want to briefly discuss before we close out the show is I got access. Now I have Eve Valkyrie on PlayStation. I got it at launch. I got it when they had some kind of early thing or a pricing error for $20. And I don't really play it much anymore. I got my use out of it. I think it's a great game. But I got access to being able to play it on the Rift, and I wanted to see what it looked like with these new ultra settings and with the more recent, the second most recent now GeForce driver for my 1080 Ti. And man, this game looks good. So I just wanted to bring it up that I checked it out. It's still the same game. I still feel the same about the game, but holy smokes, does it look good on these new ultra settings, and especially coming from the PlayStation VR. Like it's the way to play the game, like for sure. Like I don't feel like in some of these games, like in Lone Echo, I almost don't feel like the resolution is holding the headsets back. And I know, blasphemy. Everyone says the resolution isn't where it should be, but some of these developers have figured out how to mask it more than others, I think. And this is one of those scenarios where I was just so impressed visually. It was like, okay, like this, I'm content here. Like now let's just get more games like this, not necessarily in the same style as Valkyrie, but more games that have this visual quality. Like I'm ready. I'm not worried about resolution in this moment. I'm worried about other things like God rays and just the fact that we need more content, because that's how good this game looked. And it's certainly worth checking out if you have opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I've been meaning to give Valkyrie a go. I want to try it on my Rift. Actually, I tried it on my Vive quite a while ago now, but yeah, I heard about this update. And how are they doing this? Do you know what they're doing different about this? Why is it got this ultra settings? Is it something to do with the way they're rendering it through?
I'm guessing they've worked closely with NVIDIA, because it's one of those, like, so, you know, when you go into GeForce Experience and they have game specific tweaks, it just basically, I think what it all boils down to is that NVIDIA has addressed this as a mainstream game, and they've given it extra attention in the driver so that they know that game performs well. Most VR games don't get that treatment because they're just not as popular as, say, I don't know, one of the more recent ones, BioShock or something. I don't know. Not that game is recent, but it's, you know, most VR games aren't a mainstream entry, and those are the type of games that NVIDIA usually does. But for whatever reasons, they did this with Eve Valkyrie. So there's been some promotional efforts, and some NVIDIA has gone out and said, okay, with this driver, you can now unlock ultra settings. And so it looks like they worked with CCP, the developer of Eve Valkyrie, and NVIDIA worked together to accomplish this. And, you know, contrast it to SoulKeeper, who doesn't have that relationship. Helm Systems, I doubt that they are able to partner with NVIDIA in the same way that CCP is able to. And they're able to leverage just efficiency and optimization so that they can drive up the texture quality and the resolution and all that. And it looks quite nice.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because Helm, on one of their updates on Steam, when they were talking about the performance problems with this, they said they have been in direct contact with NVIDIA. I think it's just with the usual sort of developer support with NVIDIA rather than a relationship that CCP having with them.
Right, and then CCP is, they have a game, I don't know if it's only coming to PlayStation right now, but Spark. I have to think they want to get it on other platforms, but it's like the... I'm not sure when it comes out. I feel like it was September, but maybe I'm wrong. But it's a very Tron-looking environment where you're throwing a disc in arena and you stand across from your opponent. So CCP is, you know, on the forefront, I think, of VR development, because Eve Valkyrie has been there from day zero.
Yeah. What I want, and what a lot of people want, is a single player campaign though in Eve Valkyrie. Yeah, I enjoy the way it feels. Didn't really get hooked by the multiplayer, and it being like, you know, we talked about that earlier this episode, the issues that surround multiplayer. And I'd say, I guess Eve Valkyrie, from all I know, is
in the camp with, say, Onward, where it's not completely barren in terms of community engagement. You can still get into a match and play it. But yeah, a campaign would be real nice because they've done a very good job with the title in general. So, all right, we're going to close out the show. Thanks for watching. This has been episode 49 of VR Roundtable. As usual, please give us reviews, subscribe to us on iTunes or your favorite podcast depot, wherever you do that at. If not, just hit subscribe below in YouTube if you're watching us there. And we look forward to talking to you next week. Later.
Bye.